Okay, and this is part 3 of occupational adaptation, and we're looking at, or we just finished talking about the adaptive response generation subprocess and the adaptive gestalt. Um, and so following this, um, is some sort of, you're going to have some sort of an occupational response. So the occupational response is on your diagram um, also. After the response has been carried out, um, the next step is for the person to evaluate the outcome that's been produced. And so again, we're going through the adaptive gestalt. So either the person has to allocate a lot of their energy towards cognition. They're looking at how much energy they're expelling. They're looking at using what kinds of modes, whether it's existing or new, and how are they responding behaviorally? Is it primitive? Is it more mature? And so from there, they're going to have some sort of response to their occupation. They're going to be able to complete their occupation, okay? And then from there, we move towards the left-hand side of your diagram to the adaptive response evaluation subprocess. And so, again, this is where the client needs to be determining, hey, did I do good here or did I not do good? And so there are two parts. There are experiencing of relative mastery, and there's the assessment of occupational events. And again, I have these on a diagram for you written out. What we assume is that the person can evaluate their response in terms of how they did it, how they did. Did they do good or did they not do good? And so just to kind of give you a visual here, we're looking at the adaptive response evaluation subprocess, and we're looking at the assessment of the occupational event. So the client is saying, hey, did I do this or did I not do it? Did I really brush my teeth or did I not brush my teeth? Did I make a grilled cheese sandwich? Did I not make a grilled cheese sandwich? Okay, yes, I did make a grilled cheese sandwich. So then we're going to look at how was that experience of relative mastery? I'll look at, was I efficient? Was I effective? And was there satisfaction to myself or to society? So relative mastery is important in a person's evaluation of themselves and how they do. And so efficiency, how well did I use my time, energy, and resources? Okay. Effectiveness, to what extent was my goal achieved? Okay, was I very effective if I burnt one side of my sandwich? Also, satisfaction to myself and society, extent to which a person finds personally satisfying and socially acceptable. You know, my sandwich that I burned really was not that good, even though I just burnt it on one side. So I really wasn't that satisfied with it. Also, when I think of grooming and hygiene and those sorts of occupations, sometimes we have to look at what's socially acceptable. And again, I used the example of brushing teeth earlier. Brushing teeth is something that is socially acceptable. So I may not care if I brushed my teeth or not. I do, but you know, some people don't. And so that may not be acceptable if it's not socially acceptable. Looking at relative mastery, the adaptive response evaluation subprocess is not the same as skilled mastery, meaning some sort of an assessment by an outside source. Okay, it's a phenomenological assessment. And basically what phenomenology is, it's the study of a specific phenomenon in a given situation, given time. And so only the client themselves would know how they did. Okay, so the assessment is coming from them. It's coming from their perception of a performance, as opposed to an assessment from, say, an occupational therapist saying, nope, you know what? You totally burned that one side of your sandwich. That is not acceptable for anybody. And so isolate the sandwich. Okay, yes, it wasn't that good, but it was still somewhat acceptable to where I ate it. I didn't have to have somebody coming in from an outside source telling me that it wasn't acceptable. I was able to make that call on my own. Relative mastery can be experienced as something positive or negative. It's a way of describing their self-evaluation. So again, being able to say whether or not they did it and how well they did, it's okay if it didn't go so well. When we look at the adaptive response integration subprocess, now this is on your diagram on the far left side. This is where all the information from the occupational event, okay, becomes translated and stored into a form that a person can use in the future. So what we assume here is that there's some sort of integration that requires the person to retain their memory of the event from beginning to end. So again, this is where all the information comes together and I can use it for later. Okay, so this is about the client again. The client needs to be able to retain how they did in that event from beginning to end. The occupational responses that are evaluated can either produce positive or negative outcomes. And even if it's negative, that's okay because it will just lead to an increased adaptive capacity, meaning that, you know what, I burned my sandwich recently. In the future, hopefully I'll remember to turn my oven heat down, my oven temperature, so I don't burn it on one side. The action of the adaptive response integration subprocess transforms into the adaptive adaptive capacity, and that leads to overall generalizability. So basically, if I can sum it up, it means that we learn from our actions. If we make a mistake, we learn from our actions. We do it differently next time based on what we learned. And so again, it starts from the person. Okay, there's 3 parts of the person. We come down to the adaptive generation subprocess. We get a response, which is covered up here. Then we adapt to that response, or we identify how we identify how we did, and then we adapt to the response based on what we did, and we learn from what we did. Okay, so let me say that. I kind of feel like I was rambling. So from the person comes the adaptive response subprocess. Okay, this is where we're trying maybe something new or something existing. It gives us a response, basically how we did or what we did. Then we need to evaluate, did we do it or not? Or the client needs to evaluate, did they do it or not? Were they efficient, effective? Are they satisfied? If they are satisfied, they'll remember what they used and they'll complete the whole process again. If they're not satisfied with what they did, then here they're going to identify what could they do differently, and they'll learn from it. And then when they go to complete that occupation again, they'll do what they learned. Okay, they'll redo it. So assessment and incorporation by the occupational environment. So now we're looking at the far right-hand side of our diagram. The occupational environment assesses the occupational response of the person. This assessment is based on a comparison of the person's expectations to that of the environment. Okay, so this is more so on the environment side. The person side, there's a lot of internal processes going on, right? Like, how did I do? Did I do the task? What do I need to do differently? On the environment side, it's based on, okay, how am I performing? And how is that working in the environment? So it provides the possibility that the environment can use this information. We can modify the environment, or we can change our expectations, or we can keep them the same. So again, there's this whole process on this side of your diagram too, where we need to identify if the environment's working for us or not. So again, we have our occupational environment here. Okay, as we go down the center, we are assessing the response of our outcomes. So our expectations met from making a grilled cheese sandwich. Okay, well, no, they weren't really met. So then we move over here to incorporate into our occupational environment. So either I modified the environment or no change was needed. So for me, I turned down my oven based on burning one side of my sandwich. So I did adapt the environment in some way, shape, or form, which then attributed to the occupational environment of self-care because I was cooking in my kitchen, which is a self-care task. So looking at occupational adaptation and how we apply intervention as an OT. We know that adaptiveness can lead to enhanced occupational performance. Giving a person with a hip replacement a long-handle shoe horn, sock aid, reacher is going to adapt how they dress, but it's going to increase how they're able to dress themselves independently. The client, whether through their internal adaptive capacity, so that internal process, the person themselves, the client, is the agent of change. The therapist is merely an agent of modifying or identifying or looking at that occupational environment and whether or not that environment needs to be changed. Intervention is focused on enhancing the health and strength of the client's internal capacity. So our intervention is, again, focused at that adaptive response generation sub-process where we're helping the client through their identifying their energy, looking at what kind of modes they're using, and looking at their response behaviors. And this is so that the client can take it a step further and identify and sort of evolve and adapt their occupations and learn from their occupations as they complete them, as they move on in life. So the client selects the occupational role for the intervention, and the emphasis is an active planning intervention. So again, they're very client-centered using this model. The client is involved in the evaluation of the outcomes of the intervention. And OA does not tell the therapist what to do. It tells the therapist what questions to ask. And so if you look at page 213 in your Kramer-Hinojosa text, it will give you some examples of what kinds of questions that therapists should ask. OA is not a collection of techniques, nor is it a specific technique. It's just a mere guide to help us identify what's going on in the environment, what's going on with the client, with the person, and to help them so they can evaluate themselves how they're doing. So I hope that helps clarify OA. Work on your study guides. There's some answers are in your readings if I did not cover them in your text. And after a couple weeks, I will kind of work on the study guide myself, and maybe I can post the answers for you if you so choose. I hope you appreciate the voiceover lecture, and I will see you soon. Thank you.